Today's guest is someone whose football story reminds us that there isn't just one way into the game. Not every football journey starts with putting on shoulder pads. Sometimes it starts in the background, volunteering, showing up, falling in love with the game from the edges, and learning how much work it takes to make football happen before anyone ever steps on the field. Emily Todd has built her place in football through that kind of work. She's with Football Ontario, where she has been deeply involved in growing women's and girls football across the province. Her journey has included volunteering with the Burlington Stampeders, playing flag football at Western, working with the Western Mustangs football program, taking part in the CFL Women in Football program with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and helping build more pathways for girls and women in the game. But today, I don't just want to talk about the titles or the programs. I want to talk about what it means to build the game from the inside out. Because so much of football growth happens in places people don't always see through schedules, emails, camps, tryouts, meetings, registration links, funding conversations, and the belief that if the pathway doesn't exist yet, maybe you have to help create it. And every time a girl gets to try football earlier than we did, every time a woman sees a real role for herself in the game, every time an opportunity becomes more than a one-off moment, there is usually someone behind the scenes who cared enough to build the door. Emily has been one of those people. So today we're going to talk about her football journey, how she found her way into the game, the emotional side of building opportunities for others, and what the next chapter of women and girls football can look like. Emily Todd, welcome to Blitz and Bloom.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. That just got me all pumped for this conversation. So thank you.
It's like the walking out of the tunnel situation. It's that pregame pump up speech, but in podcast form.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. I'm
You're,
excited.
you're very welcome. I'm very happy to have you. So I want to start by setting the scene a little bit. I mentioned some of your stops on your football journey so far, but I would love to hear the journey from your perspective. Can you give us a quick rundown, kind of the Coles notes of how you got into football and the places that it's taken you so far?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I feel like this past weekend I met a group of women who were not involved in sport, and I was explaining what I do, and they're like, "Oh, did you play? How'd you get involved?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's kind of like a long-winded story, but I basically just became a football fan first." And it's funny that you said Burlington Stampeders because I completely forgot that I did that, but that's one of our local community clubs in Ontario. I'm from Burlington. My cousins both played football, my uncle coached, so I would just kinda, go to their games, and then I started going to those games to get volunteer hours with some of my friends in high school, and they put me, on concessions, but I'm terrible at math, so my family still jokes about it. They're like, "You probably owe that organization, a lot of money," because I could not do quick math, but I got into it that way, and then I just started learning more about the game, more about the rules, and, I knew, friends that played, so there was always, a emotional connection for me, I guess, of, knowing people that played and kind of being invested that way. And then when my cousins went on to play at University of Guelph, my uncle coached there. He's still a coach there. He's the offensive line coach. I started going there on weekends and same thing. I'm just I loved the culture. I love the community, getting to know the players. And I wanted to go to Guelph for that reason. And my parents were like, please focus on your education and not football. So I went to Western because the program just made more sense for me there. And like you said, in my third year, I was looking for something to do. I was involved in other initiatives and stuff my first 2 years. And my third year, my dad was like, well, why don't you ask the football coach, who was Greg Marshall at the time? He's like, make the connection of who your uncle is, because people know my uncle. I kind of use that as an in. So I met with G Marsh before the season and I just kind of said, I just want to be involved in football. I want to be on the sidelines if possible, which is a pretty big ask. But I'm like, I'll do anything you need me to do essentially. I just wanted to be involved in the team and support and anything I could bring. So he had me work with the equipment manager, which I had no equipment experience, but again, it's just one of those things that it's your title is equipment manager, but there's usually a lot of other things that go into that. So I was at every practice. They brought me on road games, which was really nice. I traveled with the team out east one year when we were there for playoffs. So again, I just loved the community aspect, getting to know people every year and just kind of doing whatever I could to support. Again, not having an AT background, not having a coaching background, but I would support players on the sidelines. I would help with stuff during the off season. I'd sort their jerseys before like games, that kind of thing. And then from there, I helped out with a local high school. I did some of their like social media stuff. Again, like something I hadn't done before, but again, another like behind the scenes kind of piece that goes into football. And then from there, I started volunteering with Football Ontario, and it kind of led me to where I am today.
Amazing. So many stops and like very consistent with women in football where it's I was doing something I've actually never done before and I just learned along the way. And when you think back to that earliest version of yourself who loved football, what do you remember about what the sport gave you?
I think I remember in grade 12, I started to really like figure it out. And I think it was I started going to more of my high school football games. And again, like having that connection to the players, like they're your classmates, they're your friends, you know who they are, you're cheering for them. But I was like, I was one of the few people in my friend group who like understood the rules of football. I also liked bringing more people into that space that way. And especially my female friends who have no idea of what's going on really and being able to explain it to them, I think I really liked. But yeah, I remember even doing projects in school and we had to talk about a passion and mine was football and my teacher's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, I can't explain it." So just ever since, yeah, pretty much grade 12, it solidified for me that there's something here that I love. And I think through each of those experiences, there's just kind of been something else that kind of brings me in.
It very much gives something that other sports spaces and community spaces just doesn't. And I don't know if I've really figured out what it is yet, like what that difference is, but there's just something about football that just it exists in a way that you don't have that connection with any other sports.
Yeah. I feel like part of it is the size of the team. At least if you're looking at traditional like men's tackle football, there's usually like at least 100 people in the team space. Everyone's working towards the same goal. Like everybody's super dedicated, everybody's pulling their weight, and it's a community essentially, everybody working for the same thing. And I find every football season, it takes so much out of you and it's so long, but then when it's done, there's like a come down after football season. I find it like every time.
But yeah, big time. And I think really football is kind of one of the last sports that hasn't evolved into this year-round event. You look at basketball and you look at soccer and it's, there's indoor soccer, outdoor soccer. There's, basketball, there's spring basketball, then there's regular season basketball. So it's just every other sport seems to have taken up the whole year. But football, having that hard limit of really, you can only do so many weeks of contact, really gives that
Mhm.
big peak. And like you said, that big valley after
Yeah,
that
for
incumbent.
sure.
So, like I mentioned earlier, something that is fairly consistent for women in football is that there usually isn't this perfect linear traditional football path. So much of it is finding ways to stay close to the game, stepping through whatever small doors open, and eventually realizing those doors have something bigger behind them. You've talked about early experiences like volunteering, playing flag at Western, and being around the Western Mustangs football program. What did those experiences teach you about the game from the inside?
So similar to what we said about it being a community and just everybody having a different role, kind of interesting because now that I'm in the provincial space and there's only 6 staff, it's like everybody has a role, but everybody kinda does everything. Whereas, like, if you're looking at a university team or a professional team, it's like this is your role for most of them. But, I think, like, just the community piece was really big. So at Western, being with that team, they did a really good job of making me feel included. I was a one of 3 women that were part of the team on staff in some capacity, and I always felt like I didn't necessarily have a place to fit in. Like in undergrad, I wasn't somebody who's going out partying all the time. I just wanted to be doing football all the time. I'm like, these are the people that I connect with, that I resonate with, whether it was players, coaches, other staff. Yeah, they're easy to talk to, they're easy to connect with. I feel like I fit in. If I'm going out, it's because we're celebrating a win. That made my experience for me at Western. And people ask if I liked being at Western. I'm like, yeah, because I was with the football team for sure.
That's so great that you had such a good experience. It's always a gamble on, talking to women in the community and what their experience was like. And some of them are like, it was fine. And then there's some who are like, no, it was actually a really great experience. And I think such a big piece of that is it's very dependent on the leader in that space. We've seen it across the CFL with the women in football program. I know speaking to some of the women in the program, You see the ones that have a great time and you see the ones that don't have the best time. And then you look at who the people are in leadership in those spaces and you're like, well, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
understand why that would be the case. So having someone like Greg Marshall, such an icon in Canadian football, give you such a positive experience is not a surprise. It aligns with who he is and how he's shown up in the football community. Going from being in school, you were going to school for education, and then trying to chase the pathway of being a teacher. What was that point where you realized that I don't just love football, I actually am going to take the jump and work in football?
This is interesting. People are like, "When did you know?" And it's as simple as my contract as a teacher did not get renewed. I took French in my undergrad at Western, and then I went to teachers college for 2 years, and then I graduated teachers college during COVID, unfortunately, which is, like, the worst time to start a career. So I taught for 2 years, and yeah, they just didn't renew my contract, unfortunately, and at that time, I had started volunteering with Football Ontario. So I'd been with them for maybe 6 months or so at that point, and I was starting to get an understanding of the women and girls program. I was working with our provincial team, and at that point, that was, like, the first provincial women's tackle team we'd had, and I loved it. I had a couple conversations as well with Laurence from the CFL, who was also a teacher, and she kinda talked about her transition into working in sport, and I was like, "I just wanna be like Laurence, honestly. If I can make this work, I'm gonna do it." So, the timing was just that it came time for the summer. My contract wasn't renewed as a teacher. I traveled with the Team Ontario to the first women's tackle championship, and when I came back from that, Football Ontario was like, "We'll give you a part-time position. We wanna keep seeing these women's programs grow, and we think you're the person to support with that." So, it started as part-time and then became full-time.
It's amazing how the universe just kind of puts those things on a platter sometimes and hands it over, and you look at it in hindsight, and it's, well, yeah, that happened that way, and it makes sense that it happened that way, and I'm glad that it happened that way. But in the moment, it can be a little dicey. Did you initially have any fear going into depending full time on football, depending full time on something that's a nonprofit?
No, I think because I was just so excited to be working in sport. I did have another job at the time, fortunately. I was working for an accounting and assurance company, just like in administration. So I had that as well, but I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, like, this is kind of until football becomes full time. I was always kind of like banking on that. I think looking back, that maybe should have been more of a thought of like, you're going into a not for profit. Just from the financial aspect, it's not always the most sustainable, unfortunately. I think at the time, I didn't know how I would be able to work in football. I knew I always wanted to be involved, and then this opportunity came where I could work and do the things that I loved and be in the community and work with, like, women in sport, and I was like, "This is perfect. This is everything I've ever wanted."
I think it's super neat that you really started in football in this community sense. And in essence, that's what drew you into that job and really gives you, you can tell when you talk about it, how much you light up about the community and being there and supporting and building and growing. And it's just, it's so genuine and it's just so meant to be.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because when I started too, or when I first had that volunteer role with Football Ontario, I had applied to it and somebody that I knew at Western put in a recommendation for me, which was very kind of them. Otherwise, I don't know if they would have really taken me in, even though it was a volunteer role. But I think I was probably the only woman that applied. And they were like, "Oh, you can do our women and girls programs." And I was like, I didn't even really know. Like, I played for a semester of flag football at Western, but I didn't really know there were full blown like women's teams or leagues, and I didn't really know women were playing tackle. Like, I was brand new to it, and it was kind of starting in Ontario too. I think we were a little bit behind, but yeah, the fact that they were just like, "Yeah, you can just oversee our women's programs." And I'm like, "I don't have any experience with that. All my experience is in men's tackle," but it worked out, so it was good.
You've kind of spoke to this next part a little bit about being in these spaces and either not being familiar with what you're doing or being familiar with what you're doing, but not quite sure and having so many different job roles within a title. And a lot of people, especially I think women in football, carry this pressure that they have to justify how they got there and why they're there. Like if you didn't play at the highest level or coach for 20 years or come through the usual linear route, you're feeling like you have to constantly prove that you belong. I know that has always been something that I've struggled with, so I would love to hear your perspective on that.
I think it's something I still struggle with. I feel like only within the past little bit, I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, if you're not gonna take my advice, my opinion. Like, I'm very aware that I don't have as much football experience as some people in this space, but I do bring a valid perspective. I'm in this role for a reason. I have great relationships with our athletes. Like, they come to me, they give me feedback, whether it's about building programming or how to improve programming or stuff that they're seeing, stuff that they want to experience. So I'm kind of just, I'm at a point where I'm like, I know my worth. I know the people that come to me in this space and that trust me. I'm going to continue to give my advice and support where I can. And if you don't want to take it, then I'm like, that's okay. And in a couple years' time, when you come to me and you ask me, then I'll be like, well, we had this conversation 2 years ago, because unfortunately, that's the case currently.
I think if you interviewed all of the women across the board in football, that would be an experience that we all share quite consistently. But I know I struggle and I have actual football background. And I know even to get into coaching, it wasn't until I played Team Canada where I actually felt that I had the not even the ability, but the right to coach football. So it's such a fine line between, and I think you've done a really great job at managing it. And I think you speak to it in a really positive way of like, I recognize what I bring to the table and that's just what I'm going to base off of it. But I do know that it is a huge struggle for a lot of women. And then that's just what's happening in our own brains. That's not even taking into account what all the external pieces are saying to us.
Yeah, I struggle with that piece, and I think I did for a long time, and I still do, like, in certain situations, but I struggled for a long time of feeling like I don't belong in this space, like, I don't have the experience, I'm not, like, knowledgeable, but I think I'm also, and maybe I do this, like, naturally, and maybe women do this naturally. I'm the first to say I'm not an expert in this. I'll support our coaches, I help with hiring our Team Ontario coaches. I don't have a coaching background, but I can speak to what I know is good for athlete development or what our athletes need or what I've seen in the past. And I think you said it perfect. As women, we don't bring those things to the forefront as much. We maybe focus on things that we're not as good at. And it's like, but we have so many qualities that we are. And there's a reason that we're here.
And I think that's where the true power of having women in football or even just diversity in general is that you're getting those different perspectives. You look at a lot of the rooms and everyone's the same. Everyone came from the same pathway, the same background, and they just continuously look at everything in a very similar manner. And obviously, there's power to having those coaches and those people have mentors in that space. And, they always talk about in football, oh, that coach comes from that bloodline of coaching. He learned from him. And then these five coaches over here also learned from him. And they're, scattered all around now. And while I think that's really great, I also think that's like a very aggressive attachment to who all of those individual people are as coaches and kind of giving one person credit for their success or on the flip side, their failures. But I think the more people in football can have different perspectives from different outlooks, it just provides so much more value. And that goes in business. Like it's the same in business, it's the same in everything. It's really no different. It's just I feel sports have a tendency to want to live in their box a little bit more.
And that's why in my role, I feel a responsibility for that because I've been on the side of hiring provincial coaches. I'm making sure I'm putting people in place that are obviously right for the role, but are also diverse perspectives, diverse experiences. Or I'm going to use our example for our head coach of Team Ontario this year. He's been in the tackle football space for a long time, but he is like so passionate about growing and helping to develop women in this space that I'm like, those are the people that we need in those positions because we have on staff 4 young female coaches, former Team Ontario athletes that if I had someone else in that role, like they might not have gotten that opportunity.
It's so important about who is in what space, at what time, and what their motivation is. And sometimes I think, unfortunately, in women's football, and I've seen this where there's some really great men who come into the space and very much mean well and do amazing things for the sport and genuinely want to move it forward. However, there is also some men that come into it and look at it. And I would actually, you know what? I can't even actually just say men. I would actually just say people. in this situation that come into the sport and they recognize that the in to get into something is a little bit easier. So maybe we're going to go this way because I would never be able to get into coaching at this level on the men's side. So I'm going to go on the women's side and try and do these things. And like I said, there's some very great men that do not fall into that category, but unfortunately there is men and women who just kind of see it as an easier path because there's a little bit less barriers. And when you're trying to build something, you just always need bodies, bodies, bodies. So it's as someone that does the things that you do, you have to be so cautious about who you bring into the spaces and what their motivation is.
Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes you don't see that until after the fact. If you see people coming into the women's space and then just checking a box, and it's like, I've coached at this level, and then it's like, hey, this will help me get this next opportunity. Whereas, yeah, it's unfortunate, but eventually they do get weeded out. And even though we're a big province, there's a lot of football going on. It's not that big of a community. You know who's in it for the right reasons. Um, I mean, yeah, hearing you talk about it, I'm like, "Okay, it's not just here, it's kinda everywhere, unfortunately," but yeah.
100%. And like you said, it really I do feel that one of the really big positives is in the women's community, I think those people do get weeded out a lot faster versus I think in the men's side of things, sometimes they stick around a lot longer or really just never get weeded out. They just kind of get pushed to the side. But in the women's community inside of things, and just when you're developing and building something new, it's like you are very quick. It's such a delicate ecosystem. So you're wanting to get them out right away because you don't want to disrupt that ecosystem. So people are very on top of making those decisions. And I think just collectively, as the people who exist in those spaces, like you said, people become very aware. It's a small community at the end of the day, and they just eliminate those people and remove those people before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, and even, like, the again, one of the things I love about working in women's football is, like, depending on your relationships with the athletes, they'll be honest. They will tell you, and I don't know if it's the same on the boys' side because, again, it is more established, like, more competitive maybe from that aspect, but, yeah, some of our female athletes will be the first ones to give some feedback on coaches, which is good because then, like, I'm like, I need that in my role to be able to make those types of decisions.
From my experience, I would say boys and men are much less likely to speak up about those things versus the girls are like, no, I actually don't like this person or like this person's doing this. They're much more likely to speak up. And I think a lot of it is that girls and women, we have nothing to lose. Like we are, this is our opportunities are already limited. So, and we're already trying to build and grow them that we're like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And we see also how detrimental it can be to the space versus I think on male side of things, it's also a delicate ecosystem in the sense that people can get pushed like players and like opportunities can be pushed out or limited very, very quickly if you get on the wrong side of someone. I've seen that play out in many different levels, very young levels, all the way to the professional levels where it's just some one person decides they don't like someone and generally, it's not always for a good reason, and it's just they're on the outside looking in. So I think there's a lot more there's more safety in coaching in the men's side of things. There's more safety as a player in the women's side of things right now.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Also, I love that our conversation has very quickly shifted to football politics. When everyone's like, "There's so many politics in sport," I'm like, "That's yeah, it's a lot. It's in everything."
Yeah, it's in everything, and it's easy to when you are existing in an established program, it's very easy, I think, to kind of put the blinders on and just be like, "It is what it is." But I think and I notice this a lot when I'm in kind of builder positions, is it becomes so much more consequential. So you have to do something about it. You don't have the ability to just ignore it and hope it goes away because it could be the one thing that holds you back from being able to build something. So, working in the admin side of things, I want to really take listeners into that space to help them really truly understand. And I think even, a fan listening from a professional football perspective, just understanding that growing and building sport isn't just what happens on the field. It's growing because someone is building the schedules, answering emails, organizing the camps, finding coaches, creating pathways, dealing with parents. Fun with that managing conflict, applying for funding, and just trying to make that experience better year after year. Currently, right now, you are the Director of Development and Administration with Football Ontario in your ever evolving job title, which I realized when I was doing research, it's different every 6 weeks. Obviously, I'm joking. It's not every 6 weeks, but there's a lot of different renditions of it. But for people who don't fully understand sport administration, how would you explain what your work actually is?
That's a really good question. It depends on the day and it depends on the time of year. So, that's funny you say that about my title because I wish my title was something else. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The administration part does because from the admin side, I support with our finances, for example. So I'm responsible for like sending e-transfers, paying invoices, supporting our bookkeeper, setting budgets. And then I am responsible for overseeing our storage unit because I live 20 minutes away from it. So I'm the closest. So anytime we have an event, I'm packing up a U-Haul with all the equipment. I'm making sure it's coming back. Usually responsible for ordering more equipment if necessary. I work with our apparel partner. So anytime we need apparel for events, I'm supporting on that side of things, supporting with accommodations and travel. So for our coaches to get to and from ID camps and that sort of thing, I'm helping with that. And then facilities bookings is more so on the women and girls side because that's my portfolio. I feel like there's a lot more. Social media, again, we're a small staff of 6 people and we have like 30,000 members. So when people are like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "We all kind of do a little bit of everything." But social media is another big one I'm trying to do more of just because I enjoy it and I like having that creative outlet, I think, whether it's making graphics or content or coming up with different initiatives and things like that. And then on the women and girls side, I'm the lead for our women's tackle. So I oversee our Team Ontario women's tackle. I work with our director of culture and sport because he oversees the men's tackle. So we kind of work together when we're planning our regional ID camps that we do in the winter and then just like building out that pathway each year. And then my favorite part, which unfortunately is only 10 days out of the year, is when I travel with the girls team to nationals and I don't have to do as much of like all the other stuff. I just get to like be with the athletes, support them in a way that I really enjoy. Again, because I'm not a coach, I can have conversations with them about other stuff, whether it's about playing time or it's just personal things that they're going through. Just like being an extra like resource and support for them. That's my favorite part. So I get to do that in a month, which is the best.
That was very exciting. And I know Football Ontario also was trying to field a women's program for nationals, and obviously you are not. What were the challenges with moving that program forward?
I think one of the challenges, the main challenge, is we're behind the other provinces at the community level for those teams. So we have built in the past few years a pretty good women's tackle league. That really only started in 2022 after that first national championship. We came back from that and then we had a season with 3 teams. And then since then, I think we're up to 17 teams across like 2 age groups. So it's like grown a lot. But all of those athletes that have aged out, they don't have anywhere to play, unfortunately. So I've been really advocating to get that senior league developed. I think it might look a little different. I don't think we'll be at 17 teams. It might be more regionally based to start and then kind of go from there. I think one of the challenges we touched on it a little bit is it's still growing, at least in Ontario, women's football is still growing and it's always the same people that are involved. So a bunch of our coaches would want to play in the senior league. So we need to make sure obviously those two, the junior league or the U18 league doesn't overlap with the senior because we'd have coaches wanting to play. So I think that's a challenge is like our just our general capacity. And we're trying to like our numbers are growing in terms of athletes, but I think our next goal is to get more coaches into this space, more people that maybe don't have an overlap with wanting to play, but people that, again, are just invested in women's football that have the background or, have the certifications at least to coach those programs. So I think those are our 2 biggest challenges right now. I've been fighting for it for 3 years. I fought for the national championship and that's happening and I'm glad and I'm like, "Oh, it's Ontario's not there, but I'm glad that it's happening this year and I'm hoping next year we can, yeah, figure it out."
I mean, you gotta start somewhere, and it's so interesting that it's almost the opposite of where Alberta kind of was. We had all the women's programs, we had no girls' programs, and that whole piece started from me being, frustrated about not having more and better teammates. So I was like, "We need to start a girls' program, we need to have a feeder program," versus you guys have the opposite problem. You have all these girls' programs, but you have nowhere for them to play once they graduate out of those.
Yeah. So right now, our Ontario Women's Football League, so there's a U19 and a U16 division. They play mid-May to basically mid-July. Like their season ends right before nationals, obviously. So I think that's one of the challenges is just finding a time when that season would make sense. Some of the arguments have been like players that would potentially play in the senior women's league or off at like university and college and that kind of thing if we want to run it in the fall. And it's interesting you talk about the feeder because that's the other argument is well we should focus next on U14 girls and getting that program in. I agree. We need to build it at both ends, but I'm more concerned and again I have good relationships with the athletes that come to me and they're like, "When are we getting a senior women's team?" I'm really trying, guys. Like I'm doing what I can because some of them have been aged out of that program for a couple years now, and unless they're super dedicated and invested, they're gonna find something else to play, and I don't blame them.
That's, I think, a big challenge with football, and I know a big challenge that we've seen out in BC with trying to grow it is, well, like, there's minimal opportunities. So, girls are gonna get into the sport, play until they're 18, and then what? So, a lot of their parents see it as, well, she can go play rugby, and she can maybe go to college and play rugby. So, why would we put her in football when she could potentially lose out on sporting opportunities? When you're competing with something that has no end to it, and you have a very hard end, it's a really hard sell to get people to really want to commit to it. It can be a great side program, but also you don't want athletes just playing football as just a whatever. You're always going to some athletes like that, but I think you want the girls and you want the women who are in it to make the most out of it.
I'm hoping too with the women's championship that's happening this summer that motivates some more people, whether it's people on the administrative side or the coaching side or whatever it is. I hope people see that and they're like, "Oh, we need to make this happen for Ontario." We for sure have the athletes. That's not my concern at this point. We just, yeah, need to have some foundation for them. And I think the other piece too, and I've worked with some of the other women at the other provinces and Football Canada a little bit is we need to, I mean, ideally get back to a place where there's an international competition. So then, even then, it's like when you guys go to the women's national tournament this summer, then it's like there's even beyond that, there's another step and you could potentially represent Team Canada. So I think it's just like working on making that pathway as clear as possible, understanding that there are other challenges, but we'll do what we can.
I talk about this all the time how disproportionately COVID impacted women's sports, specifically women's football. It just, we were on a roll. Everything was lining up perfectly. We went from women's nationals to Team Canada, then we started the girls stuff, and then we started girls nationals, and then COVID hit. And just all of that continuity just stopped. And now we're in a position where women's nationals is happening 10 years after the last competition, which is so frustrating because there's been so much growth in the girls' game. And then we've just not been able to give women the opportunity to compete on that level and that stage. And while it's really great and it makes me very happy that the girls' opportunities and girls' nationals is being treated so well and being really invested in, you need both of them. You can't just put your eggs in one basket. You have to commit to both of those for those programs to thrive.
And what are your thoughts? Because I know BC and Alberta did that U16 girls game last year. I'm flipping this, I'm interviewing you now. What are your thoughts? Because that's, I think, again, from the other side of it, like, keeping that side growing as well, so, like, it all can kind of grow, like, do you see that growing as well at that age group? Again, similar to, like, the U16 East-West that Football Canada does?
Yeah, we are doing another U16 competition this year. It's with 4 provinces in Calgary. So there will be another bigger version of that, which I think is really great. Just, giving some of the provinces that don't have the bodies and the support and the resources to put a U18 girls team together for nationals, giving them lower investment opportunity to be able to move their programs forward, which I mean, without something like that, I think BC would have a really hard time with continuity. It's already challenging enough having, the lower mainland, the island, and bringing those girls together and having to take the ferry, the costs add up, the time adds up. It's not as accessible. And then you have the whole interior, which is completely inaccessible for the most part because driving is just so far. You're very limited in the time frame where people are willing to make that drive because of the mountains and the snow and all of that. So I think that's a big limiting factor, but having a competition to at least work towards, I think just gives those girls who do really want to commit to the sport something to do. But growth wise, I think BC is going to be very challenging, with one of the big things being that there is no women's program. And the ability to get a women's program out here, I don't know if that's overly or easily feasible. Because again, if you want to play in the WWCFL, that's a 12, 14, 15-hour drive through the mountains, or you're flying. So then your funds are going to have to be super, super high. There's also not the community base, I would say, out here that a lot of the other provinces have. It's very split out here. So, you have 11 aside high school, 12 aside community. Resources get spread really, really thin because of that. So the opportunity to kind of build something off of an existing program. I think if anything, the ability to build a women's program, it would maybe have to be built off of like a junior program or like alongside a junior program. I think that would be the best opportunity. But I think it's a little ways out. I think there's a lot of barriers. I mean, if girls and women really want to play, they can go down to Seattle. At least it's reasonably close. It's still a really big commitment, but it's gonna take some time, I think, of getting more girls in the program and more women interested in football. It's a very different landscape, and I haven't really figured out what makes it so different out here, but it's not quite like Alberta, where you just have a lot more people willing to give it a try, and it seems a lot more foreign out here.
Interesting. Okay. I'm like, maybe I moved to BC and we tag team
I mean, look, more bodies always makes things easier. I
this.
think that's always the hardest thing is, and I know
Yeah.
I've taken a little bit of a step back because I've wanted to put more of the onus on the provincial sport organization to take responsibility for owning these programs and moving these programs forward, because I know it's very, very easy for someone to just, take it on their back, do all the work and make it happen. And I know that's possible, but I also know it's not sustainable.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
the biggest thing is sustainability is, yeah, it might grow slower, but it's sustainable. It's built in the system. And at the end of the day, the provincial sport organization owes it both to the boys and girls to offer programming. It might not be in their current structure, but they need to change the structure to allow for that, which I will give huge props to Alberta in how they've developed and how they've changed, because that PSO, that provincial sport organization, Football Alberta, is not the same sport organization that they were 5 years ago, 8 years ago. It is a completely different landscape. And the cool thing is it's almost the same people, which means that we had people who were kind of stuck in a certain mindset who were actually able to get out of that, bring themselves into the girls' world and realize the value that it showed, not just for the girls and the women who were playing and participating, but for their organization and for the boys and the men's programs too. I think that's such a huge win to see, because I think a lot of the time we think we need to burn it down to build it back up. And it's seen as like that's the only way you can do it. Like people don't change. But it gives me a lot of hope and a lot of just positive mindset to see Football Alberta as an organization do such a 180 on their perspectives, on their focus, on their commitment to the girls program and the women's
Mhm.
program as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. It's, I like, when I really took a step back and thought about it, I was actually quite surprised, because I just think about all the things that I struggled with, all the things that people would say, and not even just them as an organization, but even just people in the football community. There'd just be these weird little pushbacks and just, brush offs on some things. And then to see those same people now be like some of the biggest supporters of girls football, I'm like, that's very powerful. And that makes me very happy.
I think it says a lot to the success of their girls program at least, and then having hosted in Calgary last year, and obviously, if you're gonna host it, you care about it, you're investing in it, you're investing time, money, effort. So, yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
So it's possible. You get into it, things get moving, and you start seeing examples of how it can be successful and how it can go well and what is possible. So you always have that example versus, 5, 10 years before this, you never had that. You never had the thing to look at and see that, yeah, yeah, I see that's possible. I see someone else has done this before, which means I can do it as well. You were living in a lot of the world of like maybe. I don't know if this is possible because I've never seen it, but maybe we can make it happen.
I'm hoping that mindset will help the other provinces in order to, I mean, Ontario at least from the from the women's side, but some of the other provinces with the U18 women's or the girls' side, I think that can also be super daunting. Again, I wasn't here, I was here at Football Ontario the first year we had that program, but I wasn't really a part of the planning or the before or anything like that. I can't even imagine being like, we have no idea what this is going to look like. It's a six-a-side tournament. We don't know how many teams. Yeah, it's daunting. But then hopefully for those other PSOs, they can see, okay, it's been done. It's been done. We can reach out to people and figure out their blueprint and that sort of thing.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that in Canada right now is with the girls programming across the country is it's popping up everywhere. There's not a province that's not doing it now to some capacity. I mean, when I first came out to BC, something I said all the time is I was, this province should be embarrassed that they're actually the only province in the country who is not executing some form of girls tackle football, like at
And
all.
you made it happen though.
We made it happen. We're moving forward. So it's a positive. Okay. I'm going to flip this conversation back to you since you started
Sorry.
doing the.
So I have so many more questions for you.
No, that's okay. This is great. This is what we want to talk about. Speaking of programs, what did you have to learn the hard way about building programs?
I think it's maybe one of the things that I'm still learning, and I'll use the, we call it like senior women's or like 18 plus women's tackle division. Maybe not only that, but just any programming or any events I'll say that we try to run. You can have all of the planning and the feedback and the conversations with people and the collaboration, and things can look really good on paper until sometimes you try and execute, or maybe you don't even get to the point of executing it. But I know we've had some conversations with our staff, and if we take examples of what's maybe worked on the men's side or what's worked in like certain regions of Ontario, and then we try and like apply it or replicate it. And there's just, I find the women's space to be challenging in that sense because we talked about there's just a whole other set of challenges, whether it's not having enough coaches or supports or not having the resources, or some centers do really well and they run, both like boys and girls programming, they share equipment, they get funding for both. Some of them popped up and created completely new organizations on their own. Some people struggle with getting numbers, some people struggle with like retaining athletes. Like it's just, I think that um is something that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, but I think is something I've maybe gotten better at is like problem solving. Whether it's I'm at an event and it's problem solving on the fly, trying to build a women's tackle league for women that have aged out, and you're wanting to collaborate with people, you're wanting to get feedback, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to just try something and see if it works, and then you can pivot. And I think I'm fortunate that with our staff and our CEO, he's very much like, "Let's just try something." Like, because then if we try it and it doesn't work, then we can pivot, but if we spend too much time planning, workshopping, trying to get feedback, having meetings that go, he's like, "Nothing's gonna get done." So, I really appreciate him for that and also for pushing the women's game forward because, again, I know that's not the case in every space, so
You bring up a really good point about the just doing something, taking action. I know so many people in the beginning would come to me and they would be like, with their notepad, and they're like, okay, what's the secret to success for building girls programs? What steps do I need to take? What do I need to do? And my answer would almost always be the same. You need to do something and you need to be somewhat consistent. So it could be a weekend camp one time and then you offer it again the next year. Or it could be, a regular get together. It can be just saying, hey, we want to start a league and we're going to do some camps and we're going to get together and try something. And you don't know until you try it. And then you can pivot and you can change because the thing is, if you do something that doesn't work, you also know what doesn't work. So you know that there's other options available to you. So I think that is a really big thing is just navigating the focus on taking action versus always talking about it. And I think we get stuck in that analysis paralysis all of the time and overthinking, and some sport organizations and the boards and the structure of how they do things also contribute to that problem by having too much red tape, having too much, well, this and this has to happen. What about the funding? What about this? And just having, and I understand that they need to think about those things, but when you're building something, you just got to do it. You can't nitpick it. You can't be like, oh, well, that camp only had 6 people, so this isn't worth it. We're not going to do it. And that's 6 people. That's 6 more than 0. Even if each one of them brings one friend next time, that's 12. And that is the secret to success is just taking continuous action because you can talk all you want. That's not going to make anything happen.
That's a good point. So we run our I mentioned earlier, we run our provincial ID camps in January and February. So we run 4 of them, like, different regions of Ontario, and you expect every year, at least on the girls' side, for it to continue growing. The men's, we've pretty much, like, capped, which is good. Women's, I'm like, "Okay, I'm budgeting for this many people." Our first camp, it was the first weekend of January, I think we had 10 athletes show up, and it was a moment of like, "Oh, shit." What's gonna happen? I'm trying to start U16 programming. We're trying to obviously continue the momentum with U18. And then fortunately, we ended up having 90 athletes come out to our development camp. So we had, I think it was 60 U18s and 30 U16s, like the most we've ever had. So I just kind of thought about that now. And I was like, yeah, if I had let that bog me down in January, oh my God, we only have 10 girls. Like, what is happening? Yeah.
It's very easy to panic, and a lot of organizations will pull the plug that early because they're seeing, "Oh, there's only 10 people, it's not worth it," and it's gotta start somewhere. It has to start somewhere. You're not just gonna open up a program and have 100 people show up right in the beginning. You gotta do the groundwork, and I think that kneecaps a lot of organizations and people's progress just by getting so caught up in that initial kind of low amount that they just freak out, back off, and I get it, it's scary. It kinda comes across a little bit as failure. I didn't have enough people, I'm not doing well at this, I'm not doing enough, and I always think of that there's that little infographic where it's 2 tunnels, and then there's diamonds at the end of both of them, and there's, like, the one guy who's digging, and he's halfway. He's not quite at the diamonds yet, but he's just continuously digging. And then there's the other guy who dug within inches of the diamonds and is now turning away and walking away, even though he was so close. And that's a picture that I always have in my head anytime I'm working through something hard is like, oh, but it could just be on the other side. So I can't stop. Like it's just, I know it's there. You just have to get there in the first place.
You mentioned the red tape around things, and I think one of the things that I'm always conscious of, or one of the things that could potentially hold me back, is making sure the experience is good for the athletes. So for those 10 athletes, our coaches were still enthusiastic, they're pumped, they're like, "You know what? You get more reps, focus on the positive stuff, make sure it's a good experience," because then we had some of those athletes came to our next camp, or they're gonna tell their friends to come, and that's how it continues to grow. So yeah, I think that's another thing that is always in the back of my mind. Just make it a good experience. Whoever's there, make sure they have a good time. They'll tell their friends they wanna come back.
Yeah, the last thing you wanna do is make them feel uncomfortable because there's not many people, which I've seen that play out, and then the energy's down and they're feeling almost a little exposed because there's, like, no
Yeah,
hide when there's only 6 people, so for coaches to kinda think of, like, put yourself in the athlete's perspective and actually how it feels to be one of few versus one of many, especially when a lot of girls in these situations are trying a sport for the first time and maybe haven't played, that's so scary. That takes a lot of bravery to work through, and I think just putting ourselves in their perspective some time to think about it, which is exactly what you did, is very important. Right now, when you look at women's and girls football in Ontario, what are you the most proud of to date?
I think it's definitely the growth of the sports. We've talked a lot about tackle, but I'll touch on flag a little bit as well. Being able to work with Olivia on our staff who played flag growing up, who built OWIFA, who played at Western. She's just like such an icon for women's flag football. We work closely with NFL Canada, like our women and girls partner. So at the end of every year, we'll do an infographic or a post with them on socials to show the impact and just year after year, how many more women and girls were getting involved, either like coaching or um, playing community, playing high level. It's just seeing that continue to grow, even from when I started like 4 years ago, is it's pretty cool to see. And I don't think I take enough time to take it in. We had a high school girls flag championship a couple weekends ago, and it was 20 minutes from my house. My dad wasn't working. I'm like, "Hey, if you're free, like, you can, like, come check this out." And he made me stop and realize, like, how big that event was. We had 47 teams there, all high school girls from across Ontario playing flag football. Like, that was just not a thing when I was in high school. Even 5, 6 years, like, that was just not a thing. So, he was like, "That's crazy." He's like, "I'm telling all my friends about this." Like, sometimes it takes, like, somebody outside of this space to be like, "That's a really big deal." And then I think another one for me, obviously, it's, like, our Team Ontario tackle program. That's kind of because that's, like, right my starting point with Football Ontario. We had at our first development camp, so that's, like, our final stage before we cut down to the final roster. We had 25 athletes and we needed a roster of 22. So it was like, all right, everyone's making it. And that first year was very much a learning curve. But again, to compare that to the 90 athletes we just had in May and to see how much it's grown and to see my 4 female coaches that are on staff that were all former Team Ontario players, it's pretty cool, and one of them I met at the very first ID camp we ever had. Like, it's very cool to see them giving back, yeah, and just to see the growth of that has been awesome.
And that's such organic growth when you have people who started in the program who are then coming back to contribute to building the program. A means that they are very invested in it and they see value in it. And B, it's you don't have to go and scout and find coaches. They're just showing back up. You just have people coming back. And I think that's common enough in sports. But I do think, even in developed sports, yes, I think that happens. But I don't think it has as much of an impact because it's developed already
Mhm,
versus for girls and women's sports to just have that feeder program in is such a big thing because that's ultimately what got all the men's programs to where they are is that they just had continuity and a feeder program. And if we can go from, women and girls having this pathway of all over the place to get somewhere and can make it a little bit more linear, that's a huge win. And I think we're already seeing it with a lot of the girls programs is there is a much more linear pathway. And there's still going to be, I think, that overlap of coaching and playing more so than what you would see on the men's side because
mhm,
there's no professional women's league where you can actually, fully commit yourself to being a player and being an athlete and then go choose to be a coach after. But I think it's a huge piece of developing the game when you have players who are still playing and coaching at the same time. It gives a lot back to that community. So we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to go kind of into the emotional and mindset side of being someone who's doing some things for the first time, for being someone who is building, because it's not the same as doing things that other people have done before or the same as maintaining something that already exists. How do you carry the responsibility of being someone people look up to in this space?
I'm very much a people pleaser, so I take so I take it very seriously. I I Yeah, I really don't like letting people down, and I think I set a high standard for myself for that reason. And again, like we talked a little bit about all of the aspects of my job, but being a role model or being a leader for the girls in this space or being somebody that women in this space can come to and that I can support any way that I can. I think that's like my favorite part of my job, but it's also the part that I'm like, this is this is why I'm here. Like that's kind of gives me like my purpose, I think. Um, Emotionally, I think I've gotten a lot better at handling it. I think the first year I was with Team Ontario, that tournament, like, broke me. I think it was because it was all brand new, I, didn't know what to expect. I hadn't been, like, a national championship before. I hadn't worked with a team of, like, 16-year-old girls before. I got close to them very quickly and, like, formed emotional attachments. When one of them got injured, I had to take one to a hospital. Like, it was rough, and I still obviously care for them a lot. I just feel so much, like, pride when I see them play or I get to have conversations with them or I see them being successful, but I think I've gotten better at handling that emotional side of it for the most part. There's usually one breakdown per tournament, but they're a lot less than what they were at the start.
It sounds like you've figured out the concept of staying connected to the mission, but not letting it fully consume you.
Yes, for the most part, I would say yes.
That was marginally convincing.
It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough in this space when you care so much about it, and again, I do set high standards for myself, and I am a hard worker, like, I'm very dedicated in this type of job, and even thinking about teaching too. The work's never done. We don't track our hours, so I'm flexible in that sense. I could always be working on something. I could always be improving something. I can always be like reaching out to sponsors and try to bring in more money. So I think from that aspect, it's tough. But again, why am I doing this at the end of the day? And I've had to learn to be a lot more intentional with my time and the things that I'm doing. Like just like that email can wait until tomorrow. Or if like somebody's calling me at 8 p.m., I'm like, I don't, this is not an emergency. If it is, they'll leave a message and they don't. And then it's not a problem anymore.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries are
Yeah.
such a challenging thing in this world because I think you mentioned I feel like I always can be doing something more. And when it comes to building something, that is exactly the truth, is there's always something more you can do. Your checklist is never done or there's never a good enough moment. And again, going back to the building versus maintaining. Maintaining, it's you kind of got checklists. You're okay, yeah, all these things are done that we don't need to be done. Nothing's up in flames. Great. But when you're building, there's just a never ending checklist and there's always something or more that you can be doing. And when you have that emotional investment, you're like, oh, I'll just do a little bit more. Oh, I'll just do a little bit more. And then it's very easy to, slide into that side of where you're doing too much. And then eventually that scale tips where you can fall into that point where it does consume you. And now it's actually a detriment because you can't focus properly, have too much on your plate, or you've like tried to grow something too fast in a way that's not sustainable.
Yeah. I think I used to be a lot worse. I would get bogged down if there was like an email that came back and it was like a criticism or something negative, and like that's going to happen in any job. And I feel like I'm still working on it. I feel like I've gotten better at just being like, okay, that's one person out of how many people that I communicate with on a daily basis. Or again, if it's like my focus is our female athletes or that coaching staff, the parents, I'm like, if they're good, then like I'm good. And the other, they can figure it out. They're adults. They can figure it out.
Yes, adults, always adults. I'm curious, have you ever had a moment where you thought, I don't know if I can keep doing this?
You asked this at a very interesting time. Um, I mean, transparently, I had that moment in 2022 at the national championship when I'm like, I can't take another person having to go to the hospital on this trip, or I can't take another thing going wrong with this team. But again, kind of we were saying before the podcast, if you compare it to like endurance sport, it's like you get out of that moment and then you're like, okay, that wasn't so bad. I can figure it out. I know how to deal with it next time. Um, I feel like there's been some moments lately where and I go through like ebbs and flows with this, kind of like we said for a football season of like there's parts of the year that I love and I'm approaching one now with like our team Ontario women's tackle and our community women's tackles going on or like being at events and like seeing our athletes and coaches and parents like that stuff's great. I can find that the admin stuff can just like weigh me down and or it's like sorting stuff at the storage unit that I've, like, posted on TikTok about that I'm just why am I like, why is this my job right now? Yeah, I find having to, like, go back to my purpose in some of those moments, and I'm like, "Okay, sometimes you're just gonna have to do things that aren't fully working towards a goal necessarily. Sometimes you just have to get things done and, like, again, just, like, check it off your list, and then it's like, "Okay, now I can go focus on something that I enjoy doing or something that, needs to get done that, like, adds to it." So, yeah, I think in my job, trying to, like, balance all of that can be hard for sure.
It's almost the dark side of creating is the moments where you are not creating. You get so much dopamine and so much excitement about like building and growing and creating. And then when you have to do the normal things, there's such a disparity between the two of them. So it makes those admin tasks feel worse because you're so used to being way up here. I guess it's kind of the same as football season, it's the wins and the losses, I know Rick Campbell when I was with BC Lions, something that he always said is, "You can't get too up, you can't get down." Like, you wanna try and
Yeah,
even keel, like, don't let those wins bump you way up. It's like, "Yeah, cool, great, we won, celebrate, be happy, but don't overextend yourself, like, this is so exciting," because then it makes those lower moments even more aggressive, and it's just how can you kind of regulate that down so that you don't have such a gap between those 2 parts of the job.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it for sure.
He said it in a much like, he had a much better way of saying it, but I can't remember how he says it, so but that was the concept.
That's the gist, that's okay.
Yeah.
I got I got it.
But speaking of the CFL, I wanna touch on your time with the CFL Women in Football program and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. We know that those kinds of experiences obviously can be very validating, but they can also open your eyes to how much and what happens behind the scenes at the pro level, whether it be positive or negative. What did your experience with the Tiger Cats teach you?
So we touched on this a little bit earlier about, like, we have conversations with women in this space and we kind of have an understanding of what their experience was like. I had the best experience with the Tie Cats. I was really fortunate with the leadership that was in place with Coach O and just the coaching staff in general, the operations staff. So I went in and supported Tamara Jones. She was the director of operations at the time, and she was awesome. She was, again, similar to you in the sense that, like, I remember we went all of us went for dinner, like, the year before or something, and I was, like, thinking of applying for that, and I just really appreciated both of you and, like, your honesty in, again, the highs and lows of working in sport, and, like, you're not sugarcoating it. You're great that you have this opportunity, but you're like, there's parts of it that are, like, really tough. So, I really appreciated her in that sense, and she was just, like, super easygoing, so easy to talk to, so supportive. She helped me, set, like, meetings and connections with other people at the Tie Cats just to kind of get, like, a full experience of what everyone does. Um yeah, and similar to Western, like, I had a really great experience there. Everyone was super welcoming and super kind, like, the players were awesome, so I loved it. The staff has since changed since I was there, so, I don't unfortunately talk to as many people in the organization anymore, but when I was there, it was really good, and even to the extent that, like, I live close enough to Hamilton that I would still go even after my internship was done. I would go throughout the summer and same thing. I was like, "Tamara, like, anything you need me to do, like, I'll come on game day." I went on game day and I helped with, like, player parking. Like, I would have to, like, validate their parking to go into the thing. But again, just to, like, still see them and still be involved. Keandre Smith, one of the players, his mom is a, football official in Ontario. So I see her, like, once a month at our events and just get to, like, chat with her and connect with her. So again, obviously, like, I've talked a lot about community, but, like, that aspect is something that I loved, and I think, like, the whole team and the community in Hamilton at the time was, like, awesome. It was, like, a really great experience for me.
What surprised you the most about professional football operations?
Um, I think how many parallels there were because I was working at Football Ontario at the time, how many parallels there were to my job in not-for-profit, in the sense of, like, it's on a bigger scale, obviously, but it's just, like, you're kinda doing everything. Tamara was, like, putting together schedules for training camp, making sure coaches and athletes had everything that they needed, coordinating rides to the airport, coordinating rides to get, like, medical treatment, like, just everything is on that operations staff, and I don't think people realize that necessarily until you're in it. Like, I didn't when I first started at Western, like, I didn't really know what football operations was. I don't know if anybody still knows what it is. It's like anything that needs to get done, like, ops will figure it out. So, yeah, that was probably the biggest learning curve.
I feel like operations is really just being a professional parent and a professional problem solver put together. And it doesn't matter if it's for like youth or for grown men. You're still in a role of, I need to get these people to where they need to get. You're like shepherding them places. You're making sure that everything is taken care of. Amazing men and athletes in the CFL, but very much so they're like locked into their football and some of those very little simple things. They they lose the ability to make sure that those things are done and just need someone to be there for them to make it.
Yeah, one of them, that was the other thing too, when they made the playoffs that year, they went to Montreal, Tamara called me and invited me with them, which was like, again, not something they had to do, like, but they covered that expense, and I was, like, so grateful for that. But on that trip, morning of game day, Tamara comes up to me, she's like, "Hey, this person left their energy drink in their room, like, I'm gonna need you to go get that because they need it before the game." I'm like, "This is, like, a grown man." I was like, "What am I doing right now? What is my job right now?" But it's always fun.
They're just a ball of fun all of the time. And as much as they're grown up, I think And I think it's a both a positive and a negative is, like, being in the football space for so long allows them to, like, very much stay youthful and joyful because they're not out in the real world outside of football, like, they're kind of in that happy space. But I do think, and I've talked about this with a couple players, many players actually, is, like, also that space doesn't really prepare you the best for real life. So when that football journey ends, you're like, "Oh, I have to schedule my day. I have to do these things on my own. I can't just call football ops and have it taken care of." They still do those things on their own, but it's very different. And even just to lose that hard structure, and I know I found this after my last year with the Lions, going back out into the world and not having that, "Okay, you're at the office at 6:30, we practice at this time, we do this." And it's like I knew every day how much time I had to do X, Y, and Z that I needed to get done. That structure does so much for you. And when that structure goes away, it's very hard to figure out what to do with yourself.
I can even imagine the transition from, like, training camp into regular season. Like, because when we were at training camp, it's like exactly that. It's like everything's structured for you. You wake up, you have breakfast, you have practice, you have meetings, you rest, you have like, it's everything is scheduled for you. And then even coming out of that and, like, especially being a rookie athlete and having to manage your time, like, I can't imagine because that's all they've ever done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They've just been football players and they haven't
Yeah.
had, and I would see a lot of the American players come up, and luckily there's always amazing vets on the team who had been there before and would support them. But it's a lot to walk into, is you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how long it's going to last. You're in a completely different country, which as much as it's Canada and US, it's still very, very different. And you're in a city, especially out in Vancouver, which is very volatile in the sense of you're trying to find somewhere to rent. Like, good luck. It's better now, but, like, back then, years ago, it was not easy. It was just not, you couldn't just go rent a room for $500 at University of Regina, like,
Yeah.
Saskatchewan. It's you are paying $2,500 for a one-bedroom apartment, or you need to find a roommate. It's a lot, and especially in the different cities. Going back to that experience, was there anything specific that you learned that you, in that moment, were like, "I'm bringing this back to Football Ontario with me?"
I think the first thing that came to mind was, just, like, the standard that they set, and I'm sure it's, different and, like, depends on, like, the culture of the team and everything, and I'm gonna attribute a lot of this to Tamara because she would say this as well, she's very type A, but even something as simple as she's, like, stocking the fridge with stuff for the coaches, and she's like, "The labels are out. Everything looks neat, everything is in order." She's, like, very prepared and very efficient, and I think, again, that's something that it's maybe I don't wanna say easier said than done, but just depends on the situation. Like, again, we've got 6 staff. We're doing our best. Our processes and like, our workflows have definitely gotten a lot better, but I think having somebody like that on staff or somebody like that in sport, and she also comes from a sport background, so she's very good at, like, blending the 2, I think is, like, a huge help. So that was even something that I'm like, "Okay, from an admin perspective, like, what can I standardize? What can I organize? What can I prep and plan in advance so that we're not scrambling at the last minute to get stuff done?" Um, and again, with the tie cats, that was just, like, the standard that was set for the coaches. Like, everybody was, like, organized, prepped, people might stay till 2 AM watching film, but they're prepped and ready to go for the next day.
I wanna touch on not just your experience with the Women in Football program, but kind of your outlook and belief in the program and how you see it impacting the community.
I had a really great experience. I loved it. I think at the time, I could probably have potentially seen myself working in that space. It is incredibly demanding. I don't know how you did it for as long as you did. Like, I say sport in general is demanding, but even in in a professional sense, I feel like it's just a whole other level. So it does teach you a lot, and I think the part of the program that I like is how I'll say diverse it is in the sense that they bring in people from different backgrounds. Like, you have people in operations, coaching, equipment, like, that's awesome. In terms of, like, longevity, I have had this conversation before of just like, let's just take a look at how many women right now are in the CFL. And unfortunately, it's not maybe as many as it should be or could be given this program. And again, I know people have different experiences in the program and the salary cap, like you're not always like you're not guaranteed a job at the end of it, I understand. But if the goal is to get more women into the CFL, I feel that we might need to take a different approach. Again, I had a great experience. I loved it. I know a lot of other people had great experiences, but unfortunately, even some women that were in the CFL 3 years ago when I did that program are no longer there. And I'd be curious. I don't even know if there are any women, and there's no female coaches. No. I know of one for sure who did the program the first year who's still working at the organization in like a business ops perspective. Um, yeah, I don't know. And I don't like criticizing something and not having an answer or a solution. I don't know what the solution is right now. I think one of the other challenges is the program was not standard across all of the clubs. And we've spoken on that. Like people have different experiences and that, that's going to happen with different coaches, with different team cultures, with like what role, like my role is obviously different than somebody in a coaching role, but yeah, it needs to be a priority for all of the clubs if they're gonna continue it, and not just like, "I'm doing this because I've been told to."
The people that are behind the programs, they understand, they have the belief in it, they know the value that it brings to the table. But unfortunately, when you take it to people who don't understand, then they're just checking boxes versus being here is a great opportunity to like open up our club and try something new and have a new perspective. It just becomes a like, okay, yeah, we just do this, get it done and over with. Once training camp's over, we're on to the regular season. We don't have to worry about it. So it's you put these rules in with the intention that you're trying to open up and you're trying to diversify and you're trying to do things better. But the downfall is always going to be that the people who are actually executing and offer like are the ones running these opportunities in the individual clubs. If they don't understand the value in it or see the value in it, then you're always going to be limited by that.
Yeah. It's almost like you need again, it shouldn't come to this, but you need someone at each of those clubs who's like, "I take this seriously, like, I believe in this. I'm gonna take this on and mentor this person," like Tamara did for me. And again, other people in at least the Football Ontario space that have done it, either the Women in Football program or the Diversity in Football program, again, they've had great experiences. They've, learned a lot. They've built connections. They're still close with, like, their coaches and people that they worked with, but in terms of, like, getting roles in the CFL, we're just not seeing that translate, unfortunately.
And I think you say it really well when you say experiences, which you've said multiple times, is it's like, yeah, people are having great experiences. So it's kind of painted it as this picture of it's an experience, you're in, you're out, and it's either good or bad, but that's really all that's coming out of it. I know I've always spoken to when I first got hired, people are, oh, well, this is gonna start like a new thing and there's gonna be more women in the CFL because you're here and da 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 da. And I always said, I was like, yeah, it's cool that I'm here. That's great, but until there's more women under me, before there's more women in the CFL, this isn't a success. And the biggest thing is, like we've talked about, is pathways. It's great that there's been women at the top in the CFL, but the middle hasn't changed. There's not more female coaches at a junior level. There's not more female coaches at a university level. I would say that there's more female coaches in youth sports, which is great, which is like where it all needs to start. Because ultimately, if you want to climb through coaching ranks, you still need to learn everything along the way. And I think with all the work that you're doing and all the provinces are doing and collectively across Canada for women and girls football, I think there's the slow burn that's going to happen. And eventually in 5, 10 years, I think there's going to be a little bit more kind of push on women trying to get into the CFL, especially because they will actually have very equitable experience to some of the men as well. But I know it was hard for me. And going back to one of the questions I asked, where you feel you don't know enough or have done enough to deserve the role or to deserve to be in the space. And I struggled with that because I knew, like, yeah, I don't have the experience. I never coached at college level. I, coached a little bit at junior. So there's this huge gap. And with that comes a bit of a knowledge gap and an experience gap. And it's not to say that you can't learn those things from other opportunities, which is what I had to do. I had to learn it different ways. I had to learn it from being a player. I had to learn it from just like sitting down and reading and listening to videos and all of that and asking questions. but there is always going to be that gap of knowledge and that gap of confidence, I would say, that you're having to make up. And I think until we can close that gap a little bit, I think once that gap closes, maybe we will see a lot more females in the space, or at least pushing to be in the space. And I do think there is some organizations who have been building a very good base to be able to intentionally bring a female into the CFL. I think other clubs, not so much, but I think there is a handful of clubs who, if I was to pick out where it happens next, I think I know. But again, everything is always changing and evolving. So just as much as, me and Nadia cycled through the CFL, there's also a bunch of male coaches that also cycle through the CFL just as fast. So it's kind of trying to divide what is it because it's a female trying to get into the league and what is actually just the nature of the league as well.
No, that's a good point actually to look at it from that perspective. But I know you've talked about this before, but the CFL is very much just like a revolving door. It's just you leave one club, you're going to the next. Um, let's bring some new people in and let's mix it up. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I will always talk about that for forever, nonstop, is just like, stop bringing the same people in. If Chris Jones ends up in the CFL again, I don't know. I don't understand. Like, we see these coaches come in and have a negative impact on an organization. And yes, is he a great football mind? Sure, absolutely. I will give him his flowers for that. But has he won championships? Yes. But has he had any sustainable success in the league? No. And then it's like he goes off and then we bring coaches back and then we're like surprised when it happens the same way. And there's so many talented coaches, male and female. And I think we're just the league, not even the league, but like teams and the community is just so attached to familiarity sometimes and being comfortable being around the people you want to be around, that it's a little scary for them to bring those new perspectives and new faces in. It's like, well, I think I know what I'm going to get out of this person. I expect them to do this. So it's more comfortable than, well, I don't really know what's going to happen if I bring in this person who's never been here. But also, we need to stop doing the same things over and over and over again and expecting different results.
I think too, like I see this at like the youth level, the provincial level, like national level on the youth side. There's talented female coaches, but again, it's that feeling of I don't have enough experience. I didn't grow up playing football. There's other people that know more than me. And like maybe that's the case, but there's also a lot of like really good qualified female coaches that don't give themselves enough credit. I've had to like DM people and be like, here's the posting, you need to apply for this. It needs to be intentional like that, and I don't know if we'll get to a point in the CFL where there's people in either, head office or leagues or sorry, the teams that'll reach out to people that way and say, like, "This is meant for you, like, you should at least apply." Because sometimes, again, as women, we're not gonna always have that confidence in this space that's so male prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Cause there's a different approach and, like, going back to that gap principles, I just think as long as we can do all this work in the community to close that confidence gap and that knowledge gap, then it becomes a lot harder for people to say no. If a woman can walk into a room and say, "These are all of my qualifications, this is all the coaching I've done, this is who I was as a player, this is what I've done," then if you turn them away, like, there's people can ask, like, really have the evidence to ask questions of, like, "Why would you do that?" Versus right now, um, you know, the average female coaching resume, it's very easy to put it up against another, like a male coaching resume and be like, well, there's too much of a gap in here. It doesn't make sense because of these reasons. So even just taking the emotion out of it and just logically looking at it, it's like if we can just, make it so that you can't, it just doesn't make sense to say no because they're actually more experienced than the coaches you're trying to hire, then I think that opens it up a lot more.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I want to do a little fast fire round as we always do here on Blitz and Bloom. So they don't have to be perfect answers, just the first thing that comes to mind. They can be fun, they can be reflective, but we'll see where it takes us. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
Okay. If you were to suit up and play tackle football right now, what position would you play?
I wanna say receiver.
Favorite CFL player?
I'm gonna say Keandre. I mentioned him already, but it's really because I just love his mom so much. And she's wonderful, and she every time she sees me, like, give me a pep talk and is just one of those people that's just like, "Girl, you're killing it, like, I'm so proud of you," and I'm just yeah, it's so he's got a great mom, so I'm gonna say Keandra.
Who's going to win the Grey Cup this year?
I mean, I'm gonna say Hamilton. I think they're due. They've been due for a while, but I'll say Hamilton.
One word to describe your football journey so far.
I'm gonna say motivating.
A football memory you'll never forget.
Being at Mosaic Stadium for the first U18 women's tackle national championship and seeing Team Ontario run onto the field, and half of those girls had never played tackle football before.
A skill every sport administrator needs.
Patience,
Biggest barrier to women in football in Canada right now.
capacity.
The worst advice you've ever received in this industry.
I'm gonna say don't take it personally because I think that's just not something I have the ability to do.
What is something you've accomplished or built out of pure rage and spite?
So on a less serious note, I'll say like anytime I've had to like pack a U-Haul, it's usually full of rage because I have to do it by myself a lot of the time. It's annoying.
Something you wish more girls knew before trying football.
So I'm gonna say a couple of things. I wish they knew that, like, your first time trying football is usually not gonna be in pads. We're not gonna make you do contact right away. We ease into it, because I think that can be a barrier for some people, but also, that we have a ton of coaches that are super supportive and, like, just wanna see our athletes succeed and have fun. Like, nobody's judging you, like, everybody has a starting point.
A builder in the game that you want to shout out.
I shouted her out already, but I will say Olivia Gauche.
What has been the most important part of your journey?
I think my ability to, and it's something that I'm still working on, like we talked about, but just like have some more confidence in myself. Again, just like knowing your place, knowing your value, knowing your experience. I think that really like goes a long way. But then also being okay to admit that like I don't know everything and that I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to be wrong sometimes
What are you currently trying to get better at?
in football or in general.
In football, in life.
Trying to get better at cycling so I can complete a half Ironman in a couple weeks. But in terms of like work, I would say again, the piece of advice that I don't like is like don't take it personally. But again, just trying set those boundaries, I think, and just do your job, get your work done, focus on people that, value you and want you here.
Last one. What is your goal Ironman time?
Ugh, I don't want to say it because I will say so it's a half Ironman, so I will say sub 6:30 would be awesome. It was originally sub 6, and that's not gonna happen. Sub 6:30 would be great.
Okay. I'll let you out of the fast fire now. I had to throw that last question in there. But I do want to end with one bigger question, as we always do. After everything you've experienced in football, from finding your own way into the game to helping build pathways for others, what do you hope the next generation of girls and women get to experience in football that maybe you didn't have at the beginning?
Mm, I think we've done a good job of this, and it's something that I'm already starting to see, but just again, I've said it so many times and I'm sick of hearing myself say it, but like just having that community. I think we still have um, spots in Ontario because we're such a big province that they don't have like girls only programming. So I'm hoping we get to a point where like anywhere in Ontario where we have boys or men's programming, there's girls programming as well. And some of our athletes choose to play with the boys still. They like that co-ed aspect. They like that level of competition, which is great. But I think for the girls that want to be on a team of other like-minded female athletes, I want them to have that opportunity. And I'm going to add to that, I want them to have female coaches as role models as well. We have, again, great men in this space that are super supportive and want to help to grow and develop our coaches and our athletes. But there's just something to be said about having a female coach or a role model, somebody that understands you on a different level that I think like keeps you in the game a little bit longer.
Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. What I really appreciate about your story is that it shows how many different ways there are to belong in football. You don't have to enter through the most obvious door to make a real impact. Sometimes the people who build the game are the ones who started on the edges and just paid attention to what is missing and then decided to create something better for the next person coming through. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on today. I have one more big thing to ask is we would like to see your dog.
Okay. It's the one who's been, like, needing attention this whole
Yes.
time? Okay. He's right here.
Hello, buddy.
This is Koda.
Hi, Koda.
Who would say hi? Who's that? So confused.
So confused. Thank you for also being on Blitz and Bloom, Koda.